Hi everyone, welcome to 7 Minute Software, the video series that tries to tackle one aspect of software at a time in around 7 minutes. My name is Gallo and I am the director of the Critical Software Lab. Today, we're going to talk about a key concept in computing called compression. Compression is the technique and concept of taking some amount of data and rearranging it in such a way that it takes up less space on your hard drive. Sometimes you use compression when you want to send a file over email or over text. Sometimes you use it if you want to clean up your hard drive. Today we're going to just go over some basic principles and techniques that will get you a little bit more familiar with compression as a concept. Now, to really understand what compression is all about, we have to look at information. So let's imagine that I want to communicate thank you. We can say that using two words, thank you, or maybe we can think of a compressed way of transmitting that information. We can say in English, thanks. Now, can there be a more compressed way of describing that information? Maybe you can write THX. Now, in the English language, we can understand all of those descriptions of information as meaning the same thing. But what I've done is selectively removed some of the information that we can do without from a semantic point of view. So this is a very simple example of compression. You take a long piece of information and you selectively filter out information that is not crucially necessary to interpret the meaning of what you're trying to get across. Now, if you're familiar with the English language, you can understand that there are some letters that are missing, but your brain fills them in automatically according to some rule set. Here, the rule set is based on the English language. So how does this work with files? Well, files, as we've explored before, are made out of data, right? We can see the amount of data that each file takes up in the file browser. If, for example, you have a file that is not compressed, it is typically understood as a lossless file, meaning that no information has been lost. Remember, compression is the idea of selectively removing information that can be replaced later on according to some rule set. JPEG is probably one of the most common compressed file formats out there. A JPEG takes information related to an image and filters it down so that the image file itself takes up less space on your hard drive. Let's see a comparison of two types of JPEGs. Here, I've got one JPEG that has been drastically compressed. And so if you zoom in to this image, you can see the kinds of information that is missing as a result of that compression. So I'm zooming into this gradient image that's supposed to transition from yellow to blue, from corner to corner. But if I zoom in closely, I can see that it's not a smooth transition. There's a kind of stepping or patchiness that's going on. This is the result of JPEG compression. So what this algorithm, the process of filtering out that information, is doing is removing selective color information so that you get the gist of the image, but there are less colors to process. If there are less colors to process in an image, then the amount of data required to read that image is smaller. And so this file that I'm showing here is 5 kilobytes. That is a very small file. I'm going to open a similar image that is not as compressed, but it's still compressed. So I'm now comparing these two images. This one has a much smoother transition of colors, meaning that there are more colors in between that are helping make that visual transition. You can hardly see any kind of stepping. You have to zoom in a lot to even see a little bit of stepping, and the video that you're watching right now is probably already compressed, so you probably can't see the subtle changes here. But it looks like a pretty smooth image. Now, if you go back to the file browser and look at the comparison between the data that each file is taking up, one takes up 5 kilobytes, the other one takes up 29 kilobytes. So even though they're both compressed JPEG files, one is significantly larger than the other. If we want to look at the same image without any compression at all, you probably can't see it in a JPEG file. Most uncompressed images are typically in a different file format. These are typically known as TIFF files. And so I've got the exact same image formatted as a TIFF file, .tif, and then we can zoom into this image, maybe maximize it and zoom in. And here, I should not be able to see any banding or stepping at all of colors. All of the raw colors in this image are there. So now you should start to understand what role compression plays in file management. Sometimes you'd want to work with uncompressed information so that you have access to all of the data in its raw state. Other times you might want to compress the data so that you can send it to somebody else and they can get the gist of the information that you're trying to communicate. Now, one of the most common ways to compress general files that are not just images is a zip compression. Now, the trick with zip files is that they are compressed containers, so they are kind of compressed folders that you can put any file into. So if I have my 3 files from last video, I can put all of these into a compressed folder called a zip file. In Windows, it's very easy to do this by right-clicking and going to Send to Compressed Zipped Folder. And this is one singular file. Even though it acts like a folder, it is a container that contains all of the files that I want to compress. To access the information that is in a zip file, you're going to need to uncompress that file or expand it before you can work with the files that are inside. To uncompress a folder in Windows, all you have to do is right-click on the zip file and go down to Extract All. You will have this little pop-up window, and again, you have to know the path where you want to extract your compressed files. And I've seen this new folder appear, which has the same title as my compressed folder, and now my files are there and they're uncompressed, so I can actually work with them. You have to be careful not to work with files inside of the zip file because you can actually go into the zip file in the browser, but you can't really work with the files in here while they're inside the zip file. You need to extract everything first. There's a handy piece of software that you can download if you want to access other types of compressed folders. This software is called 7-Zip. 7-Zip is what's called a file archiver. Sometimes you will hear compressed folders referred to as archives. And 7-Zip accepts a lot of different compressed file formats. Now, once you install 7-Zip by downloading it from here, you'll have access to the tools via the right click of the button in the file browser. I hope this gave you a nice overview of compression and how to use it in a practical way. There's a lot more about compression that can be discussed, so if you're interested, I highly recommend that you research the term a little bit more, and there's a lot of different ideas and technical concepts around compression that you might find interesting. Thanks for watching.